What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind-the-scenes stuff, arm yourselves, typology stuff. If you'd like to skip straight into the video, please press the timestamp in the pinned comment. Quick update on the data collection. Everything's going well so far, our participants are performing wonderfully. Thank you for your continued participation. We are almost done. We'll be posting everything for free, including to non-members, you don't need to join to get access to this, on the Patreon. However, if you'd like to receive the results or a notification of the results immediately, join for free. We'll make a video announcing the conclusion of this stage and the release of the findings, but that'll also signal the start of the dream journaling phase, and I'd like to reopen that up for other people to come in if they want to. I'd also like current participants to submit applications anyway, not because they're doing bad work, but because I want to see if they know how to format text. Because I won't be there for every step of that, so I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. However, because of some life events, my time is going to be a bit restricted this next month. So Stage 1's findings will be released unofficially, or at least without a big video announcement, because once we make that video, we go straight into Stage 2. And I don't want to start that until I know I have the time to set everything up correctly. And then, what is causing this time restriction, and I don't know if it's going to be high restriction or low restriction, we're going to see, it's contract work for an amount I can't ignore. Now, I have the gig, but in terms of payment, I think they're going to try to fuck me. Pay me less than what they said they were going to. But even if it is a little bit less, I'm not in a position to turn down money. And there's stages to this. Stage 1 is to buy/put together a vehicle that doesn't make you look homeless if you are sleeping in it. Stage 2 is to build up housing money. First and last month, security deposit or deposits. These fuckers, they can charge you multiple security deposits, fuel, etc. Stage 3 is a legal fund. You're never expecting to have legal issues, but one person's bad day can become your bad multiple years or the rest of your life, so you need to have money set aside for that. And then, Stage 4, we can get into the really fun stuff. I'd like to make a website or forum thing. I'd like to make a shop. There's a bunch of shit I'd like to do. Okay, into the typology stuff. I don't think you use your functions. In fact, I don't think there is a you. Now, you've heard me discuss executive mode a number of times. For me, it's like a labor deal. In certain situations, particularly the professional, when I need to get something done and the problem seems impossible, you can enter a state in which every other aspect and concern of your life turns off and the impossible becomes possible. And as an INTP, I think Nemesis TE has a lot to do with that. You aren't using your TE or your shadow functions, but instead, it's like TE rationality takes over, or the TE rationale slams its foot on the gas until the problem has been resolved. And I haven't been hooked up to measurers or anything, but there are definite physiological elements to this. Your energy is heightened, your focus is like a laser beam, your heart is beating out of your chest, everything else is quiet, and this can go on for hours until the problem has been solved, at which point you crash hard. You're nauseous, you feel like you can't move, your depression comes back tenfold, and the way we were thinking about this was like your shadow taking over, which is something we talk about often, not the shadow taking over, but developing enough of a relationship with your shadow, treating it like a person, up to the point in bad situations like these, it can take over with all of its knowledge and sensibilities and abilities, while your conscious mind or your conscious sensibilities expends a lot of energy shutting everything up, and letting your shadow do its thing, which is, or would explain the exhaustion. And I still think that way of imagining it holds up, but today, dealing with some business stuff, we discovered another layer. And in this layer is a pattern about the way your functions work. I was negotiating today. Competitive environment, closing in deadline, friction, and professionally, I'm a strong interviewer. I am king of the one-on-one. That's an ability that I can't even take away from myself. And this was for a bunch of reasons, this was a weird negotiation, but internally on my side, I knew this was a job I could do. But if you asked me to do it right now with no learning, just stepping into it, no, my skill set is not there. But it is very within reach, and the tasks are very within my wheelhouse. Nonetheless, I am not a complete turnkey employee in this situation. And adding on to that, this job is going to be very obnoxious, taking me further outside my comfort zone than I like being. And I like never leaving my comfort zone. I've developed enough of a tolerance to go outside my comfort zone a little bit. This is not going to be totally, horribly outside my comfort zone, but I am not going to be a happy camper during this. So I'm going into the interview with a lot of reservation. You know the situation. You're doing this because you think you need to, but you're hoping you won't get it because you don't want to do it. But then you add on to that next layer, you need the money, and this will give you the money. Lots of frustrated, ambivalent ass swearing. And I'm competent enough to keep an interview going despite having those feelings. And in this situation, those feelings were obvious. And I could see the interview as a whole slipping. And I entered a new form. This is Dragon Ball Z. We unlocked a new transformation. We're going to call this one Serpent Mode. Because FE, operating not on a warm and cuddly level, but on a cold, calculating level, makes you feel like a cold, slithery little serpent. It felt like time slowed down, and I had a quick conversation with a part of myself. I'm envisioning the sides as the rational and the doer. The doer says, we're losing this, but it's not so far gone you can't pull it back in and lock it down if you want it. And the rational side said, this isn't exactly what I want, it's not exactly the way I want it, but shit, fuck it. We need the money. In terms of projections, we're pretty sure we can make this work. And frankly, on an amusement level, we want to see you reel this back in. And this is what we're getting into in the you don't use your function sense. When you're about to enter one of these transformations, it feels like watching someone else get into the cockpit. With executive mode, it's a shadow function, it's Nemesis TE. In this instance, it is a conscious function, inferior function, FE. In this situation, FE said, okay, I'll get it done. Crawls into the cockpit, goes to work. And that makes this handing control over way of imagining this a little more interesting, because with your shadow, or your shadow functions, yes, that makes perfect sense that your conscious mind is handing control over to your unconscious mind. But in this case, it's your conscious mind handing control over to your conscious mind. That doesn't line up. So you get a little more specific. You are handing control over to one of your functions. Not conscious to unconscious, but letting one function have control over all the other functions. It's not strictly conscious versus unconscious, with you as your conscious functions and your shadow as your unconscious functions. It's more like all your functions have an identity. And there's no singular ego standing behind or above your functions, whether they're conscious or unconscious, and picking them up and using them as tools in the hands of this singular ego. But instead, the way I'm imagining it now, it's more like a throne from which commands are handed down to all your other functions. And one function sits on the throne. Not an ego, not a you, but a part of you. At any given moment, a part of you is telling all your other functions what to do. And again, it's not wielded, it is commanded. So going back to when we were focused heavily on the shadow, we made it clear you don't use your shadow functions. Instead, the more of a connection you develop with your shadow, the more of an X shadow function way your conscious functions operate. So for an INTP, you'll never be using TE. Instead, you will be using your conscious functions to mimic TE, which can be effective. It's not exactly TE though. Now we're realizing this can happen with your conscious functions, and when it does, your conscious functions operate at the beck and call of whatever function, whatever conscious function even, is on the throne. So for me, here in Serpent mode, it was FE. And for me, this has never happened this vividly. One of your functions coming to you, asking you if you want it to do its job at a high level, giving it clearance, and then it operating at that high level. So I'm sitting here for the remainder of the interview, watching FE reel it back in and then lock it down. Not operating on the TE efficiency level, not operating on the TI if then level, not operating on the SI, my track record level, not operating on the NE. These are all the things we could do level. All those things were part of it, but this was FE using itself and orchestrating all the other functions to say exactly what needed to be said, when it needed to be said, in the way it needed to be said, to re-spark that excitement, that confidence, etc. And now I have the job. Unless something catastrophic happens. And maybe a little bit of a tangent, but the key thing about FE here, and maybe FE in general, is I didn't lie about any of my capabilities or reservations or needs or any of these things. I bought myself a paid training period, and a few other smaller accommodations that will still be annoying, but not that bad. But it all came down to presentation. We talk about that constellation sometimes. As an INTP, it's not just putting stars in the sky, it's aligning them in different ways. I didn't change the product I was selling, I just sold it better, based on what this individual wanted to be sold. And actually, it's funny because somebody I knew saw me doing this. And when it was all over, he had a weird look on his face. FE operating at a high level is unnerving. And I don't think FE has ever operated that actively for me, that effectively, that way ever before. But this is the point of the video. You, a singular ego, don't use your functions. I'm increasingly beginning to think you are not a singular ego. You are a series of functions that imagines itself as a singular ego, but clearly is not. Because you don't just develop a connection with your shadow, conscious and unconscious, and then hand over control sometimes when your shadow feels like helping you out, although that can happen. Any of your functions can take the throne and start issuing commands. And maybe that's what looping is, maybe that's what function preference is, maybe that's what your ego is. Maybe the you think you are is whatever function is on the throne at the moment, or is most in control. And again, I don't think you're ever wielding your functions like tools. I think they're a team, they operate together, and they answer to whichever function, both its sensibilities and what it's being called on to do, is in charge. And I think looking at it this way is the key to unlocking further transformations. I didn't really think of it as a mode or as a transformation, but sometimes I'll get into joke mode in which all I can think about is different word associations or concepts, putting them together in funny ways. It's joke mode. I have to work to get myself out of it. All I can think about when I'm in this state is how I can put things together in a way I think is funny. After witnessing FE do its thing at this high level, I think maybe that's any sitting on the throne. Except any, as an INTP, is so close to your dominant function, so close to your standard mode of being, you don't register it as taking the throne because this is just a way you get sometimes. But it's not just a way you get sometimes. It's one of your non dominant functions taking over, but it happens regularly enough because it's close enough to the top, you don't register it. You don't register that anything has happened. Okay, we will cut it here. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.